We all know that neurodivergent people can hyperfocus. They're often, great at pattern recognition, highly creative,
Yep.
really good in a crisis, really good at problem solving. These are really important skills that not everybody has. Let's let the people who naturally have them use them.
Welcome to Healthcare Liberty Labs with Tiffany Ryder, where we teach you what they don't want you to know about healthcare.
It wasn't until I was pregnant during the pandemic that I got a diagnosis for ADHD. And that diagnosis was my missing puzzle piece. So once I learned I had ADHD, I actually started to get the proper treatment. And then a lot of my chronic health problems were getting a lot better also, as I think even my doctors were surprised. I was like, oh, my migraines are now 3 times less. And all these other things that just started to naturally get better as I was getting treatment for ADHD. And it was like my own kind of wonky journey to get to a point where I even got treatment, because when I was diagnosed, I was pregnant, I was thinking about that, and I just didn't take it that seriously. But I got pretty hit in postpartum, and that's when I was like, okay, I got to take this seriously. And then I started learning more about it for myself and realized there are millions of women who are not getting diagnosed until similar points like I did, like postpartum, their kids get a diagnosis, or they're hitting perimenopause or menopause, or they just have so many more responsibilities because they're often like high performing at work. And it's just like midlife is kind of a really crunchy age where you just have so many responsibilities and pressures. And, the systems that like I built for myself or these other women just like don't cut it anymore. And so I started building a place where women like me could find what they actually needed, which was education for adult women, which I couldn't find. Like I found a lot of stuff for kids.
Yep.
And treatment, access to treatment, access to community is huge. And then just like mental health and emotional support. And so, so I've been working on.
The thing that always sticks out to me is there was a woman, an ADHD speaker. I think she also is a PhD in psychology, but she wrote this piece on being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult woman, and how she felt like for her, it was really like she had always thought that there was something wrong with her. She always thought she, again, very much like the story that you just shared, like had these like chronic health problems and just sort of like a bunch of weird things going on, but didn't really know. And, was getting doctors telling her that she was just anxious or that she should stop being a hypochondriac or, whatever it was. And when she got her diagnosis, she said, it was like I was a MacBook and I was trying to run all of these programs on a Windows computer or Windows programs on my MacBook. And like, for me, that was the perfect analogy, because I also have an ADHD diagnosis, which like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful. Now I know what programs to run. And then other times I'm like, I don't have ADHD. This is like, this is overdiagnosed. This is someone trying to put some Western label on me that I don't even need, so it's like, there is this interplay of like, how can we use the information that's available and sort of this categorization of symptoms, essentially, right? To bring us to like a higher level of acceptance of ourselves, acceptance of others, connection with others, and productivity and fulfillment is sort of how I view that. I'm not sure how you and your community members are seeing that. Like, what are you seeing in that space?
I actually feel like the biggest piece is the emotional journey that you go through when you get a diagnosis, because 1, it's so stigmatized. 2, it's so like interwoven with identity, and identity is really critical for mental health and well-being. It's also kind of gives you this reason for things, which can be super helpful. So that's often when the relief comes in. It's like, oh, okay, well, that thing from 10th grade now makes so much sense, or like my struggle in school makes so much sense, or whatever it is that you went through often has a different lens when you have that diagnosis, which can help people kind of like make sense of their past in a way that allows for more self-compassion.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side is the grief, which is like, if I had known earlier, then maybe that would have never happened, or maybe I would have gotten proper support, or maybe I would have chosen like an entirely different career. And then that's when I see like the identity piece come in, which is a lot of times the diagnosis forces people to really reevaluate who they are, what they care about, how their brains and bodies work, because they have a better understanding. Therefore, like, am I in the right environments? Am I in the right relationships? Am I following my passions, which often there's many, not just one.
Yeah.
And so it can be really confusing, especially when you're also a lot of times like the women who come to our community, navigating a diagnosis for a child, like for one of your kids, and then the whole school system and IEPs and occupational therapy. And then you're like, wait, I didn't get any of this stuff. And then you're also trying to teach yourself how to emotionally regulate when you have like a toddler who's melting down every 5 seconds. That can be really challenging for people. And so I think it's, you're almost like growing up again, but with a different lens. And so it can be really, just confusing and hard. And I think that's why community is so important.
As you're like talking and describing diagnosis and, you know, the different ways that it can be used as a tool and the different ways that people react to it, you know, I personally have only had very positive after effects of getting this diagnosis. I did not take it as a any sort of like, I don't know, negative thing for me. There was no, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm so upset about this. It was like only a positive thing for me. But I think a lot of that had to do with the way I got the diagnosis and the environment that I was in and the professionals that I was really surrounded by and the messaging that I was receiving during that time. And one thing that is really a gray area for me as a clinician is I don't want to hear about these like 16 diagnostic things that need to happen and all of this testing and all of this nonsense, because that is a barrier to a patient receiving care and treatment. And I want it to be easy. But at the same time, when you make it easy, when I can hop on a telemedicine appointment and get a diagnosis of ADHD in, you know, a half hour, then the risk to that is that this integrative process of being surrounded in the right environment doesn't happen. And so I don't know any, you know, I don't have the answers for that, but it's something that I would think could make a diagnosis either a trauma, a source of trauma, or a blessing. And I wonder, like what is the community experience over at Divergently? Like, what are people experiencing out in the wild?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of all over the place, and it does depend on how and where you get your diagnosis. And I would say a very large percentage of people come with like on the internet, they're saying is self-diagnosis, which we don't use that term at Divergently because you cannot diagnose yourself really. One, it's not safe, and two, you just like you can self-identify and then go get a diagnosis. But there's a lot of women who are just self-identify and don't want to go through the medical system and get an actual diagnosis. They don't want it on their record. They don't want their employer to find out or it to affect their insurance, or they just don't really necessarily want medication. So, but they need the label to be able to do everything else, which is like get peer support, understand themselves, have language to communicate with their partners or their family members or friends what they need, better understand their sensory needs and things like that. So, I mean, I think that's a huge trend especially for late diagnosis. I also feel like there is a decent amount of people that are probably misdiagnosed, especially if they came through in postpartum, because postpartum is just hard. It's just hard. And the society that we live in makes it harder, right? Like if you think about in China, where there's like almost any other culture except for ours, like Western culture, especially America, they have a tradition in place where the mothers are cared for so they can care for the babies, right? So like, but in America, the mothers like are trying to care for themselves and care for their babies and oftentimes go back to work. And it just shouldn't be like that. And so you're exhausted, you're not getting any sleep, your body's gone through like a major physical change. Like hormones have changed, your whole identity again has changed. So there's just like so much going on in postpartum. And then you have like the pregnancy changes of the like your brain changing, and it can create ADHD like symptoms. So I do feel like there are some women who are either self-identifying or going through these quick evals and getting a diagnosis, getting medication, which may help, but ADHD might not actually be the real root of the problem. And it can get confusing too, because I think what I hear a lot is pushback against those historical pieces of the evaluations, because a lot of times in the ADHD and autism communities, relationships with the family are really strained.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I don't have a relationship with my family. Like, I don't have anyone to send you to interview, or I don't have like grade school reports or whatever it is. And so sometimes there's pushback on that, but I do think there's a lot of confusion, especially in like patient populations around like what ADHD is. It's not a mental health disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disability. And so like, yeah, it's something you're born with. It's not something that you get in middle school or high school or college or when you're in your corporate career in your 30s. So it's just, it does need to have been there from the beginning, or like you said, grade school is usually when it shows up because the symptoms are more obvious in a school setting around peers, and when you have to like do focused work and sit and all those things you're required to do at school. So it's really complicated. And that, like, I think at our, like in our space where I don't try to judge or like say, you don't have a diagnosis, you should get a diagnosis, your self-diagnosis is not valid. Yeah. It's more like, here's some tools and resources for you to learn and explore on your own. But we'll do a lot of vetting first to make sure, like, we don't send you to a 30-minute telehealth evaluation. Like, we'll send you somewhere who's going to do a good job. And if there is like a relationship issue with your family, or you don't have a way to get historical records, okay, we'll find a workaround. But it's like, we're not going to just encourage people to get quick diagnoses, because it might feel better in the short term, but a misdiagnosis is not going to help you in the long term. And there's actually risks there. Yeah. So yeah, I think my approach is just like, here's all the information that we know is accurate and to the best that science has, and here's some stories from people who have been through it. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of find your own way, because everybody's journey is like very individual.
It's true. And I think that it's not, you really do need to be like looking at what's the end game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many things in medicine that we essentially, I think, meddle with. And at the end of the day, doesn't provide the patients with a better quality of life. It doesn't extend their life. It doesn't make their relationships happier. It doesn't make them healthier. They're not more productive. They just attend more medical appointments and take more medication. And like that, I think, is the number one goal, right? Like anything and everything that we do should be to improve quality of life or overall survival, right? Like it shouldn't be just like random things that we're doing because we really like the health insurance company or our doctor or the pharmaceutical companies, and we want to funnel money to them. It doesn't make any sense if it's not helping.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, so when you're talking about these diagnoses, like what sort of supports are people like really excited about? What are people actually getting the most bang for their buck for their investment of time or money or resources?
Yeah, it's actually just like the community, I think, is the most valuable piece. And I invested quite a bit actually in training on like how to build and run a community. And they kept saying, like community is never the main offering. Like never, like community is not what people want. But in my case, it is. And I actually started the company with like a more of a marketplace solution. Yeah. And I kept hearing from the customers, this is great. Like I love all these amazing sensory friendly products, yeah. But like I want education, I want community. And so then I made like a full pivot and built that instead. But it's just because you've gone 30, like the average age of diagnosis is 35, 36, somewhere right around there. Yeah, I know, for women, not for men, for women.
Women in general, not on your platform. You're saying
in general. And for autistic women, it takes on average 10 years from when they seek a diagnosis to get the right one. 10 years. Yeah. And usually with autism in girls, it's around the mid 30s when they're looking for a diagnosis. So I see that even, at least in my community, a bit later, like 40s or 50. I had a woman 75 come my way that just got diagnosed. So yeah. But I mean, you've gone through so much of your life. You've like often had a family or you're starting a family, you have a career, and then it's like burnout, which is when people find me as like, okay, I did all these things. I did them really, really well. And I worked really hard. It's just like, you know, the calm duck and the feet are paddling underneath. I feel like that's all the women that come to me is like, they've been paddling for so hard and so long and like hiding it their whole life. And now they finally can talk about it and process it and go through that like grief and not do it alone, because it's like, you can't always go to your partner or your parents or even your coworkers or friends because they haven't been through it. They don't understand. They now have to also learn to get to know you through a different lens. And there is that stigma there too. So a lot of people get resistance from their partners and their parents or their like community that they have in their day-to-day life. So having a space where there is no resistance and it's just like, we have a space in our community that's basically like a rage room, and it's like, this is one space where you can come and just vent.
Yeah.
And it allows people to do that without like the whole space being trauma dumping, which is great. But I think sometimes people just need to be like, I had to reheat my coffee 10 times today. It was that kind of day. And, you know, you don't want to just like complain all the time to your family, but sometimes you need a place to go and say that. So it's really just, having other people that get it and see you. That is the value. My view has always been, we don't need to change or cure ADHD and autism. We need to support it. And support could look like medical treatment. Doesn't always have to. Sometimes it is diet, exercise.
Yeah. But I mean, the other side of that is, well, I don't want to give someone, I don't know, a bunch of Adderall so that a 6-year-old, a bunch of Adderall so that he or she can sit in their desk and not go to recess for 8 hours or, you know, whatever. Like what a dumb idea. And I think the same is true. I love this concept of sensitivity, because I think anybody who doesn't fit in the mold feels some sort of shame, right? Like, you know, to varying degrees. But I think that this whole idea of groupthink and this whole idea of we all have to be the same and we all have to be like this shape, like really lends itself to that. And like, if we look at it through that lens, it really gives us the opportunity to say, is this the environment that we want? And if it's completely appropriate, cool, then let's just figure out how to make this one person more comfortable. But if it's really just something that like has no potential to benefit, you know, life or society, or isn't worth the negative repercussions at some level, then we have to have a conversation about that.
For sure. And it gives us an opportunity to be curious too. It's like, what does that person know that I don't know? Like, what are they perceiving that I'm not perceiving? And I think it's one of the frustrations I hear all the time from women in my community is that like they see stuff before other people, or they perceive it, feel it. And some of it's explained by like heightened pattern recognition, but some of it is just sensory perception is stronger, like the sensitivity. So like, for example, I used to teach pre-K when I was like really early in my career. And there was a little girl who would always come into the class, and she was like very healthy and vibrant. And then there was one day where I picked her up and she just smelled weird. Like, I don't know how to explain it. She just had an odd smell. And I was like, something is wrong. And her behavior didn't change. She was eating fine. She didn't have a fever. But for like a week, she just smelled weird. And I told her parents, like, please take her to the pediatrician. I think something is wrong. And I had no reason to, like, I had no proof, just that I thought she smelled weird. And then they got really offended and basically thought I was saying that she was dirty. And it was like a month and a half went on before they took her in, but she had overnight like spiked a fever. And so they took her into the ER, and she had a massive bacterial abscess growing in the like back of her throat. And it had been growing there for a really long time. So I think when it was new, I could smell it.
Yeah.
And that's what I was picking up on. And like, it turned into a fight, and then it like strained the relationship with the parents, and they thought I was super weird. And then like, I didn't know I just knew something was wrong. And I think that happens so many times to neurodivergent people, whereas like, they don't even have a clear explanation. They just feel something is going to happen. And like, we should listen. Usually they're not wrong.
Yeah.
So
at least consider it, right?
This episode brought to you by Crowd Health. Crowd Health helps you find awesome doctors, negotiate your bills, and fund those bills through our peer-to-peer funding platform for less. Welcome to an easier way to pay for healthcare.
And the same is true with like this multiple chemical sensitivities syndrome, where, you know, if you don't understand that, or you don't know what's going on, it's super easy to just demonize these patients and say, oh, this person is just, I don't know, a hypochondriac or just wants attention or whatever. And then, you know, like, if you know what's going on, it's like, oh, well, sometimes the detoxification pathways in your liver can be screwed up. And, you know, stage 1 goes a certain speed and stage 2 goes a different speed. And there are these, you know, metabolites that happen. And it's like, oh, there's an actual explanation. Maybe we just didn't know it at some point, right? And I think that is, for some reason, medicine, I think in general, like we just forget that like 5 years ago, there were things that we were saying that were just completely wrong and stupid, and that we were blaming the patient for. And then like now we have a very clear scientific molecular explanation for whatever it is that's happening. And yet, you know, we move on, but we decide this thing, it's real. Like that patient definitely made that up. There's definitely no explanation for that. And then, you know, 5 years later, we're like, oh yeah, actually there was. And I think that, you know, that pattern certainly repeats in all areas of medicine, but I would say in the, you know, neurological spaces, maybe even more frequently.
Yeah. And if a patient is coming in and making stuff up, which I think is very rare, but I know it does happen sometimes, especially if people are like drug seeking or whatever.
Sure.
But if that's happening, they still are a patient that needs help. Yeah. Like, I think that's the thing is like, if you're
is also something that requires intervention.
Yes. Behavior is communication. And so like, if you're seeing a behavior, like you might be picking up the wrong message, but there's a message in there somewhere. Yeah. So yeah,
there's
but
a lesson to be learned.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's really, really interesting. So if we move on to, you know, like the treatment space, when people are getting diagnosed at a later age, like, are they just, I mean, it sounds like the primary function that they are coming, at least to your platform for, is community, but like, are they also seeking out these different ADA stuff for work, like different environments? Are they, you know, starting medications? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of all over the map. I think it just depends on what people's goals are. I tend to get more women who were like kind of high performing is like often how they're described, but just in corporate or were attorneys or like had their own businesses or whatever, and they just got burnt out, but they don't want to stop working, and they can work if they're properly supported. So I think, you know, I don't see so much people seeking disability support, although sometimes that is what people need, at least temporarily, until they can get out of a burnout state. And it's a lot of like, how do I go about my day-to-day differently? So part of it is just like, okay, let's clean up your environment, right? Like, let's get your house in a way that you can actually use your space and it doesn't distract you or overwhelm you. So we do like, we have coming up like digital minimalism kind of workshops. So it's just like, let's clean up your email and like teach. We have an executive functioning expert on our team who can like teach systems and strategies for managing email, organizing yourself, those kinds of things. And then also, okay, now let's go through your closet and get rid of stuff and put everything in clear bins and label them. So now you can find stuff and you don't buy duplicates of stuff.
Yeah.
And then like, it's a lot of just, I also built Divergently as a lifestyle brand because I think for women in their 30s to 60s or older even, it's not just medical care that you want. You really want like a new lifestyle, one that's more supportive to you. So it might be, okay, now when you go to work, bring noise canceling headphones and have some fidgets on your desk that don't look like toys so you can still feel like yourself at work or whatever. If you want to bring toys, go for it. But I think it is really the day-to-day. Okay, how do I exercise? Just like a lot of the women too are perfectionists, right? So they're like, I either do nothing or I'm an Olympian. That's sort of the mindset. So it's like, okay, you don't need to be an Olympian. You should not do nothing. So let's get you to move. So we partnered with a company that is building an app to help people move. It's like very ADHD friendly. It works with your calendar. It lets you choose to be outside or inside and like different kinds of activities. It's not like typical workout app where you get this protocol and you have to follow it exactly because that won't work for ADHDers. So it's just like, the goal is to move. If you went on a 15-minute walk, you did it. Good job. So it's just like more retraining yourself. And I'm doing it too. Like this is all stuff that I'm using too, to live a different way that works better for your brain and is more enjoyable. Like that's really it, is like, if you have ADHD and you didn't get a diagnosis till you were 35, you are working your butt off your whole life. You are getting criticized probably 100 times more than other kids your age. And you're probably carrying around shame and perfectionism and all these other feelings and stuffing them down and hiding them. And it's kind of like, okay, let's take that burden off you and let's go enjoy the rest of our lives because we went through a lot. So yeah.
I interviewed someone one time. He's a primary care doc, and then he just sort of ended up specializing in this niche. He just loved working with ADHD, kids and adults. And he shared something with me, and I wish I'd looked it up. I wish I had the study on hand. But he, had shared something about they had extrapolated. There's no way they could actually have produced, real-time data, but they had looked at how many times a child with ADHD is disciplined per day, and then how many times a child that's, matched without ADHD was disciplined per day. And the ADHDers, by the time that they had, reached adulthood, had 5-figure difference. Like they had, tens of thousands of more episodes with caregivers that were negative because of what you just said, right? And I do think that it leads to these patterns of overwhelm and overthinking and not quite knowing where you fit and what your values are and all of this. And I think that more than going see someone like me is being in a space where people are sharing, like you just said, right? Like ideas of like, oh yeah, I also used to get overwhelmed and always lose my keys. But what I did was I put a hook right next to my door and now I just hang it there and it's so great. And like, I don't know, whatever. That was, the simplest example I could think of, but like, oh, this is how I work in my workouts, or these are the things that resonate and like keep me from going nuts at my cubby at work. And I think that like that kind of stuff and being understood has the potential to make, this like life-altering diagnosis, like literally no big deal. Like, cool, I function as well as everybody else. I just do it a little differently.
Or better, right? Like,
Or
I think
better.
that happens too, is like when you're properly supported, you're functioning the way your brain is designed to function.
Yes.
And like we all know that neurodivergent people can hyperfocus. They're often, great at pattern recognition, highly creative,
Yep.
really good in a crisis, really good at problem solving. These are really important skills that not everybody has. And so let's let the people who naturally have them use them in a way that's not going to burn them out, give them migraines, or make them hate their jobs because I don't know, and I don't know a single person that's come to my community, not one, who doesn't want to contribute all they have to the communities around them, to their families, to their coworkers, to their jobs, to the schools where their kids are at. Like, these are big-hearted, super caring people who have a lot to give and often feel like they can't give it because they don't know how to package everything they have in a little package that fits society. And so, or they're just overwhelmed. So it's just like, let's free them up to give all their gifts and get some back.
That. I really love it. And it totally, it resonates with everything that's going on in my life. I recently, I quit a job that was like fantastic for me because of course, I was doing my job and I was doing this like side business because it's like fun and exciting for me. And, trying to work out and trying to, be a good mother to my children and, all of this stuff. And it was like I realized that, I don't know, I was doing a project, which I was good at. And I realized that it was just crushing my soul to sit and have to sit still for so many hours a day, right? I was like having to take stimulants, which is, that's fine. They work okay. But it was like I was medicating myself simply to be able to like survive and do this function. And it was like, why? So I could do that. I could literally do that for the rest of my life. I had friends who were attorneys who had ADHD and did that exact thing, and they were miserable. And I said, what is happening? Why am I doing this? And I think one of the biggest pushes was like, yes, I want to, contribute. I can contribute as an entrepreneur in a much different way than I can, in this one little box, in this one little shaped box. But like the biggest thing for me was, oh, wow, when I don't have something going on, I can go for a walk at 11 o'clock every day. And I have complete control over my calendar. And then I can go for another walk at 3. If I'm like losing my mind, I can just do that. And like the idea that someone would not be actively looking for like, how can I manage my life? Because it's okay to be who I am and it's okay to have the needs that I have. And so like, how can I just manage that in a way that suits me and like create my own environment to be successful? That maybe they would miss looking for that because they believe this lie that the only way that we're supposed to be is however someone else wants us to be. And I think that that's garbage, right? And if we have anything that, we can say is like a huge benefit, I think post-COVID, it's that we learned that a lot of people don't really function well working at home. A lot of people don't really function well working in the office. A lot of people we learned that different people are optimized in different ways, and that's fine.
It should be fine. Yeah.
Right. And it wouldn't have been fine if I had wanted to stay in my position and do the things exactly the way I was doing them. It's not fine if I only want to work 12-hour overnights in the ER. Like, you just can't do that way. Just can't. But I think that there are so many options available to us that, we need to be talking more about how to actually fit in the boxes that we actually already kind of fit in.
Yeah, I think the world is changing so fast right now. This is our time. Like, if you're neurodivergent, this is your time because there's from what I can see in history, there's been no other cultural change that allows for so much of this out of the box creative thinking. Not only allows for it, but requires it.
Yes.
And there is so much technology there. You can now build whole tech platforms without knowing how to code using AI. Like there's really so many different things you can do. And ADHDers, like if they're interested in something, will learn it. But I think it's also why people get boxed into jobs. Like if you have ADHD and you were bright, which most ADHDers are, they got put into like gifted programs at school or honors classes or whatever. And then they were told like, you're very smart. So you need to be like one of 5 careers where smart people go.
Yeah.
And then they go there and then they've learned everything there and they're not challenged anymore. And now they have new interests, but they don't know that like, that's okay. And I think it's back to the like kind of way that the neurodivergent nervous system is set up. It's like highly sensitive, but also interest driven. And so like an ADHD or autistic brain is motivated by learning and by growth and by like discovery, whereas most other people are motivated by achieving goals. And like I think for the neurodivergent population, you like the goal is the doing of the thing, like figuring it out.
Yeah.
So if you've gotten into a job and you've like so good, you're really good at your job, you're going to hate that job because you know how to do that job. You want to go somewhere where you don't know how to do it and learn that. So there needs to be like a way for people to move within their career more fluidly. And I think we're getting there, but it's still not quite there. Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship is probably the most fun and exciting way because you really, especially in the beginning stages, like need to be a generalist. You need to know how to do everything. And while that should be overwhelming, it's also for someone who's curious and doesn't like to be bored. It's like a chance to shine.
Yeah. But then we still have to learn to tolerate the boring stuff too, or we won't get very far.
An ad for neurodivergent people. If you consider yourself to be neurotypical, we still love you.
And we need you, by the way.
Oh yeah, we definitely do. We definitely do. We need the engineers to say, no, we have to do this in a methodical fashion.
Except a lot of engineers are autistic.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. There's like a funny thing in the community where they say ADHDers always find their autistic counterpart. And I'm like, maybe that's true. I don't know. Yeah. It's kind of like very structured and linear kind of thinking. And then like very, I don't want to say chaotic, but that's how it looks on the outside. Like unstructured, very out of the box thinking. And together it's a good like balance. And I think like in my business, I look for neurotypical support because it helps keep me like on track. I need somebody to be like, this is what you have to do. And this is what your calendar says. And then like my executive functioning coach is for the community, but I use her for me too.
Yeah.
So
of course. With anyone. That's awesome. So where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm at joindivergently.com or at joindivergently on social. Yeah.
That's so funny. Our sponsor is Crowd Health. And they're at joincrowdhealth.com.
Fun.
And I was always like, I wonder why they didn't just do Crowd Health. But now that I like tag them and all of my stuff, like when I have the show, I'm like, ooh, it's so cool. Like I'll be on X and I'll be like, oh, well, you shouldn't do that. You should at Join Crowd Health because it's like such a, like, it's a fun play on words. So I love that it's Joined Divergently. I won't forget now.
Ex-marketer can't get it out of my system.
I see what's going on. Okay. And then speaking of Crowd Health, I think it's super important. I am not anti your employer, like providing you with stuff, like that's cool. But what I really like to do on the show is point out solutions that, that just consumers, that you as an entrepreneur can take advantage of if you have, 4 people on your team and you don't provide like this big suite of benefits. So, if someone wants to like try out the community or whatever, is it only offered through your employer? Can I just join if I want to join? How does that work?
Like if you don't have healthcare and you're looking, so we don't take health insurance or anything. It's more of like a lifestyle platform. But if you want to pay with your FSA or HSA, we can do that.
Okay.
And we we can connect you to healthcare providers or therapists or things like that, but we're not Like we're
Okay.
not a clinical platform, we're a
Yeah.
lifestyle platform. So
That's
we're kind of
perfect.
like,
So anybody
yeah.
can join.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
like, you know, for Crowd Health, like we're basically like a peer-to-peer funding thing. So like it's not insurance. It doesn't work like insurance. And so, you know, if I want to go see a clinician, then I generally like want to find out what the cash price is and, you know, go that route. Do you guys have all of that sort of information that you provide to people?
Yeah, we can definitely get that together. Or it just depends on what you need. And
Yeah.
we'll like, that's where we start, is helping you figure out what you need. And then we can go from there and get you the right resources.
I love it. Well, I had so much fun like talking with you. I just love what you're doing. I think this is the future of healthcare is going to be less like someone wearing a white coat and telling you what to do, and it's going to be more of patients realizing, like coming out of this fog and realizing, oh, I have to look out for me. I'm looking for resources in which to do that in an intelligent manner. And, you know, like my favorite thing that Crowd Health does is they have patient advocates on staff, and the value that I think of a patient advocate, like sure, they save you money, right? Like by like helping you understand billing and charging, all of that stuff. But I think the biggest value is that like having someone who understands how the medical system works, point you in the right direction, like saves you time and money and improves your clinical outcomes. And I think that that works generally. And it also works in these very specific spaces. Like if I think that I have a cluster of symptoms that looks like ADHD, then someone who's familiar with autism, ADHD, and like a bunch of other things that kind of look like ADHD is likely to be able to point me in the right direction, you know, and I get to the endpoint faster and with less bruises than without that. And so I think, you know, it's an incredible service that you guys are able to offer just by encouraging discussion and community.
Yeah, we hope to take the pain out of it, because it's already hard enough and you waited so long. If you're like 40 and you're trying to get a diagnosis, you're like waited a long time. So yeah, it shouldn't be so hard.
It's not easy for anybody. Like anything that we can do to support each other is a no-brainer. It's something we should be doing.
Yeah. And your healthcare provider should be your team, right? Like they should be part of your care support. And so it doesn't need to be like, my healthcare provider, like I hate my doctor or whatever. It should not be like that. It should, you know, you should find a doctor who you can talk to, who listens to you. They will do the best they can in the time they have. They're people too. And it helps when you come in knowing what you need to talk about, and you can give them a little shortcut as well.
It does. It does. Thank you so much, Kendra.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been the Healthcare Liberty Lab. Thank you to our listeners and our sponsor, Crowd Health, for making this possible. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, be it Substack, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or somewhere else. We're glad to have you with us on this mission to rethink healthcare together.